So if I've selected new game, I can collect some coins, I get bored and I close it. I go back the next day and I think, I'll start a new game again. Everything's reset to 0, which is good. But this time we've got some progress. We've got up to 7, or in fact we haven't. We've got up to 10. We've gone to the NPC to save our game. We've pushed E on the keyboard to save it, and then we've closed it. Then we open the game up and we go continue game, and there's our 10 right back up there. Hey guys, welcome back. In the last tutorial, this is a two-parter by the way, the last tutorial we created some pausing mechanics. So we've got a player that can move around. If you hit P on the keyboard, the game will stop, and then you can hit P again and it will unpause. And that's a basic pause menu that we created in the last episode. So if you haven't watched that one already and you want to see how that works, then please go back and check that one out. And then this one will be a direct continuation on from that. And in this one, we're going to add in a title menu and the ability to save a game and load a game. So in order to load a game, we need some data for the system to save and then reload. And in this instance, we're going to use a score. So with the game layer selected, double click and let's add in a text box. Now we don't want this text box to be on the HUD layer, because remember the HUD layer is going to be invisible when we're not paused. So we're going to go ahead and right click on the objects layer, insert a layer above, and we're going to call this one UI, so the user information. With the text box selected, let's change this one to score text, and let's pop it up in the top left hand corner. Let's make sure the UI layer is set to 0 and 0 on the parallax like we did with the HUD. And just make sure that over on the left here in the properties you've got it selected, and the layer is selected as the UI layer. So when we hit play, you'll be able to see it up in the top left hand corner. If yours is a little bit pixelated, you can come down and click view, and then you can change the full screen quality from low to high. If we've got it on low, it'll be quite pixelated and kind of low quality. I mean, you might want that as your style of the game. That's absolutely fine if you do, but I'm going to change mine back to high. Now let's go into the event sheet, right click, add a global variable. Let's call this one score, keep it as a number. We're going to go and add an event, and we're going to say system, and we're going to do an every tick. I'm going to drag this one up above the player controls, and I'm going to say every tick. I'm going to set the text box text, set the text, and I'm going to set it to that score global variable. So whatever this global variable is saying, that text box will show it. Now we need a way to increase the score, and let's just create a very basic object that we can collect. Change the size of the sprite to 8 by 8. I'm going to make it yellow because why not? It may as well be a square coin. It's just a one frame. There it is. I'm going to put one there, one there, oh, one there. Just so there's a few that we can collect. These are just called sprite. I'm not going to change the name of that for the tutorial, but I'm going to add an event and say player on collision with sprite. We're going to go sprite and we're going to say destroy. I'm going to drag this again above the player group. In fact, I'm going to drag the player group right to the top. I'm going to say collision on collision with sprite destroy, and then system, and then add to score 1. Just make sure that when you put new game objects in, you put them on the correct layer. Mine's going to be the objects layer. So now when I play and move across to the right, there they all are. Now if every time I collect one, you can see my scores going up. I can't reach any of those, so I can only get 9. I'm just going to drag these down. Make them a little bit more attainable. Perfect. So now every time I collect one, my score will increase by 1. However, when I reset the game, my score goes back to 0, which is not what we want. But we're going to use a main game menu to facilitate whether or not we want to start from fresh or whether or not we want to continue where we left off. So I've already got a layer 2 created here because we used that as an example in the last tutorial. I'm going to go ahead and drag that above, and I'm going to rename it to menu. I'm going to create an event sheet, add an event sheet, and I'm going to call this one menu events, and I'm going to link the menu with the menu events event sheet. Make sure that it's not linked to the game menus, the game event sheet. Make sure your menu is linked to the menu events. So now I've got my menu and my menu events, and I've got my game and my game events. Now the menu layout has the HUD layer on it. We can just go ahead and delete that one. And then the size, I'm just going to make mine 320 by 180, which is the size of my viewport, just so it's a single screen. You can do whatever you want. You can change yours to the size. Just make sure that whatever's on the menu is within the viewport itself. Let's just add a very simple text box here, and I'm going to change the text to game. Just that can be the game heading. We can put that wherever we want. And I'm going to go ahead now and copy and paste that 2 more times. So what we've effectively got here is 3 instances of the same text object, and that's not going to matter because we're going to use variables to determine which bit we're clicking on. So let's go ahead and resize these down to, let's say, a 6. So these are going to be our menu options. This one's going to say new game, and I'm just going to drag that up there, and this one is going to say continue game. Now we need to give them an instance variable. You can click on any one of them to do this, it doesn't really matter. Add an instance variable, and we're going to call this one ID. You can call it whatever you want, but it's just something you're going to remember, and I'm going to give them a number. So it's going to be a number variable. They're all going to be set to 0. You can see over here in the instance variable. I'm going to leave game at 0. I'm going to put new game at 1, and I'm going to put continue game at 2, just so that I can differentiate them in the event sheet. So let's go to menu events. In fact, go back to menu, double click, we need to add the mouse. Go back to menu events, we're going to add an event, and we're going to say mouse, and we're going to say on object clicked, left clicked, and that object's going to be the text box we just created. Now under this we need to create a sub event by pushing B, and we can say text, and now we can compare that local instance variable that we assigned. So we can say if the number is equal to 1, and then we can copy and paste that out again and say if the number is equal to 2, which basically means if we're clicking on new game or we're clicking on continue game, then do this, whatever the action is. If we're clicking on 1, which is new game, we can simply add an action and say system, and we can say go to layout menu. In fact, we can just copy that over because on both instances we're going to go to, sorry, not menu, game. On both instances we're going to go to the game. It's just that we're going to load in some stuff here at ID2 on the text before we go to the game. Let's now go back to the game layout itself and double click, and let's add in local storage. And you can see it pops up there in my objects. This is going to enable us to save data to the user's device. We now need a way to save the game. Now you could do this automatically at the end of a layer, at the end of a layout or level, or you could do it where they have to interact with like a little save station. I mean, there's lots of different ways that you could make this one work. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to add in a little sprite at the end here that you have to interact with to save your game. So I'm going to double click. This could be like an NPC that you talk to, and then they're like a scribe or something, and they jot down your journey so far. I mean, for the sake of this, let's just do it that way. That's my NPC character. I'm going to call him NPC, and I'm going to add an event now on the game events, and I'm going to put it in its own group just so I can keep control of it, and I'm going to call it saving. I'm going to say player, and I'm going to say on collision with another object, and I'm going to say NPC. In fact, not on collision, I'm going to say is overlapping another object NPC. I think for the sake of making it visually appealing, let's go ahead and bear with me. Let's change this to 32 by 32. let's move the whole thing down to the bottom. Let's make it a 2-frame animation. Let's set the animation speed to 0. On frame 1, let's create a white little text box there, and let's just put the letter E in it. You can make yours probably a lot nicer looking than I'm going to make mine, but for the sake of the tutorial it doesn't need to be any nicer than that. Just make sure the animation speed is 0. Let's go ahead and close that down, and let's pop him back up where he needs to be. Now, you can see that the red square there, the collision polygon, is still in the middle. Let's just set that to bounding box for both. There we go. So now when we're overlapping anything in this red square area. And by the way, you can turn on the show collision polygons by just checking that. I like to have mine on so I can see where everything is and where it's going to collide. Now let's go back to game objects and say if we're overlapping the NPC, we're going to say NPC, and we're going to set frame to 1, and then I'm going to copy that out, and then I'm going to invert the second one and say set frame to 0. Now when I play, if I move over to the NPC, you can see that he has a little speech bubble there that says press E, and you can make that press E to save, or you can have a dialog box pop up or have a HUD come in, but again, check out some other tutorials for how that works. For now I'm just going to push E to save the game, just because you and I both know what that means. Now I'm going to add an event to saving. I'm going to say keyboard, and I'm going to say on key pressed, and I'm going to say E. Now the condition is going to be that we're only going to be able to do this if the NPC is showing animation 1. So with the keyboard on E pressed, middle section selected, push C on the keyboard to add a condition, and we're going to say NPC, and we're going to say compare frame, and we're going to say equal to 1. So if we push E and the NPC is equal to frame 1, then we can add actions to initiate the save. So let's go ahead and add that now. So we're going to say add action, we're going to say local storage, and we're going to set item. Now the item key is basically a reference for you to remember so you can stay organized, and I'm going to call this one score. It makes sense to call it something kind of similar to what you actually want to save, so you remember what it is that you're actually saving. And the value is the actual value in the game, so that's going to be our global variable, which is score. So we're going to save score, which is the global variable, to a made-up name called score, which we've assigned so we know what it is. Let's now go back to the menu and the menu events. So if we click on now load game, we're going to go system, and we're going to say system, and we're going to reset global variables and click done. And if we click on text that has ID 2, we're going to add an action, and we're going to say local storage, and we're going to check to see if an item exists. So we're going to check to see if that score variable exists. Add another event, and we're going to say local storage, and we're going to say on item exists. So if it does exist, and again we need to reference score, if the item score does exist, then we're going to add an action, and we're going to say local storage, and we're going to get that item. And again we need to reference it, score. And we're going to add an event, and we're going to say local storage, and we're going to say on item get. So once we've gotten it, we're going to say score again. We're now going to add an action, and we're going to say system, and we're going to say set value, and we're going to set that score global variable, and we're going to set it to the local storage dot item value, which is the item value that we've saved. Only once we've done that, we're then going to go to the game layer. So if I've selected new game, I can collect some coins, I get bored and I close it. I go back the next day and I think I'll start a new game again. Everything's reset to 0, which is good. But this time we've got some progress. We've got up to 7, or in fact we haven't. We've got up to 10. We've gone to the NPC to save our game. We've pushed E on the keyboard to save it, and then we've closed it. Then we open the game up and we go continue game, and there's our 10 right back up there. The last thing we can add on the menu here is an options screen. So again, I can just copy and paste out my generic text here. Just change the ID variable to 3 so I know it's a new option. Change continue game to options. Go back to my menu events, and we're going to copy and paste out this ID2, which is nested in underneath on text click. We're going to change 2 to 3. We can delete that. This time we're going to go to layouts and we're going to add a new layout. We can add a layout only, and we're going to call this one options. Go back to menu events, and then this time added action on the ID 3, and we're going to say system, and we're going to go to layout options. Now on our options layout, I'm going to set again the size to 320 by 180 so it's a single screen. I'm going to add in that text object here. I'm going to set the size to 6 because it's got that variable. I need to change it again to 4 so it's a different one altogether, because again we're referencing these numbers so each one is individual. Copy and paste out, change the ID to 4, change options back to menu. This is just a way to get back to the game, back to the game menu. Just type back or return to menu or whatever you want, and then you could just put in any options you want up here. Again, I can copy this out because it's generic. As long as I change the ID back to 0 so we're not referencing it, change that, change the text to say menu options, and then back down there, and then you can put menu options in here. You might want to put in things like being able to set difficulty. It's a little bit too much scope for this tutorial, but all you need to do is just create global variables that would control things like enemy spawn rates or how many lives the player has. But yeah, like I said, a little bit too much scope for this tutorial, but oh, and just make sure that the options is linked to the menu events, otherwise it won't work. You can click on options. Like I said, yeah, you could put in player live, select 1 2 3 4 5 continues, I don't know, music volume, and then you could change that. You could have a button that says, I don't know, lots of things to do. Perhaps we can do another tutorial on how menu options work. If you'd like to see that, just leave a comment below. But otherwise, we'll wrap this one up here. We've created effectively a menu screen with a new game, continue game, and options. And we've created the corresponding event sheets. We've put in save function so that we save how many of these little square coins we pick up, and then we load them in if we click continue game. If you've got any other questions or you'd like some follow-up on this, then do feel free to join the Discord and come and chat to me. Otherwise, thanks for watching, and if you want more stuff like this and you want it faster, then do consider becoming a Patreon. And speaking of Patreons, I'd like to give a massive thank you and a shout out to Foozle CC, Murray Lewis, MR Games, Jess Matt, Tor Hammock, Alex Anderson, Martin K, Davey Ragnarok, John Allegreza, Dan, Matt Nixon, Jordan Lane, Callum Keane, Simon Babanu, Draven, Iko Rero Martinez, Chris Massinio, and Drill Moon TV. Thanks for supporting the game dev journey, and for more information about what's on offer on the Patreon, there's a link in the description.